Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Reconstructing Truth. My name's Aaron. This is Caleb. We're grateful just to be with you guys again. Fortunately, we were not canceled last week after talking about some things that Caleb's wife just she deemed inappropriate. We won't get into it, but you'll have to go check out last week's episode to find out what that is. But as we get started, we first off, we want you to give a thumbs up to this this episode and all of our episodes.
Do it now before you realize you don't like it. Yes.
Subscribe, if you're on YouTube or podcast, wherever you're at, be sure to subscribe to what we're doing here, just to continue to help us fund this endeavor, even though we actually make no money off of that, but fund our egos and help motivate us.
But if you would like to fund us, you can contact us at...
we'll take seed money.
That's right.
At the following address.
God will pour out a blessing 10 times.
And then lastly, turn on notifications so that you can, there's some bell somewhere. I like how the YouTube people are like, click this in the corner. Yeah. There's nothing actually in the corner if you're watching it right now, but somewhere in the box, I don't know
it
where.
Would be,
I don't know.
Right
there's an icon there.
I don't know.
There's an icon here.
You sound like a boomer when you're talking about, there's some bell, some notification on this here internet.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is I may be in my mid-30s physically and according to my trips around the sun, but there's a lot of aspects about me that says I'm from a different generation.
You're a year away from telling people to get off your lawn.
I have yelled at people for being on my lawn.
Kids, get off my yard.
Oh, man. So this is unrelated to anything other than the fact that I'm lazy, and I hate my floor being dirty. And our kids do chores, and we make them keep up with a lot, but they suck. They're lazy.
Yes.
Kids are lazy.
Yes, they are.
And I can't stand. I wear shoes all the time. Pet peeve: if I step on anything, I want to murder everyone in the house. And so I just keep shoes on, so it makes me less angry. But I don't like the look of crap on my floor either.
Yeah.
And so I was gifted this cheap robot vacuum.
Yeah,
it
was great.
They're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Why do more people not have these?
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I felt like the old man, that's ridiculous. Those lazy, crappy people. And then I kind of wanted one. I talked to my wife about it. She's like, we're not buying one of those because she's older than me. Why would we do that? Yada, yada, yada. So we get this one, and it's like a cheap Walmart one that's only has one brush on one side. I've gotten brushes for it now, but I'm just every day I'm going to her honey, look what it got. This thing's producing stuff off of our floor. It's amazing. So then I convinced her to get this other one that mops too.
Yeah, My wife is laughing right now while she listens to this because we have two. Because we got the cheap one, the sweeper one first.
Yeah.
And then I found one that mops, and I was like, look at this.
You did the same thing.
So we did the same thing. But it doesn't mop like you think it will mop.
I don't
At least
care.
Ours doesn't. I don't know how yours is. But
I don't know
it's
yet.
just
we haven't got it yet.
Well, you have to just set it in a spot, and then it does ever increasing circles.
I'm waiting on the postman to bring it to me. So.
But so we got now our cheap one, our first one has finally.
No.
I've replaced the battery enough times where it's no, I'm done.
Yeah.
It's given up on life. But there was a time where we would have competing vacuum robots going in because our whole downstairs minus our bedroom is tile.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about it getting caught up on anything other than, getting stuck under the couch or whatever, getting wedged.
Yeah, that just irritated me. It gets stuck under our couch. I'm like, what kind of piece of crap are you?
Yeah, I know. But they do that, This is the worst. Listen to how privileged we are. My robot vacuum gets stuck, and then I have to get off my lazy butt and and pull it out so I don't have to sweep.
Yeah, the kids were like, "Does this mean we don't have to sweep anymore?" I said, "No, that doesn't mean that at all. You'll still
you follow the vacuum, pick up what it doesn't pick up."
So I'm not sure about the mop thing yet, how that'll work, but I know it's not meant to be the primary cleaning thing.
Yeah,
but I'm still pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it's it was nice. We don't use it nearly as much as we used to. We should, but probably because the floor. Because again, our kids are lazy also, and our floor is never. Part of using the vacuum mop or vacuum robots is that you have to kind of pick up a little bit. Yeah. So, or whatever will get stuck in there. But and so our house is a constant.
So it's not the kids I have to worry about that. My wife piles things in the floor.
Yeah.
And so like our entry hallway is always stuff that she is going to go donate. And I'm like, where does all of this stuff come from that we're perpetually donating things or getting rid of? I gotta drop that off. It's like there's forever a pile in the hallway. Unless company's coming over, then that pile's in my bedroom.
Yeah.
And then it comes back out to the hallway. And
what you need to do is get her a bunch of TV trays. Honey, the piles don't go on the floor; they go on the TV trays.
Yeah,
at least you get them up off the floor, and then you can ready to vacuum.
Yeah, then vacuum can get up there. I'm gonna build shelves.
You're welcome.
Shelves for your crap in the hallway. But I don't know how we got on that, but it's just really blessed.
We're not known to go on rants.
Yeah, because you're making fun of me for being an old man. So I'm getting with it now. I'm getting with the times.
The technology. Did you have to have one of your kids show you how to work the robot?
No, not yet. Okay. Man, we'll see with the new one. It's got a phone app and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that's going to work.
I can connect to my couch through an app.
Yeah.
I don't know why I need to. It's got Bluetooth on it apparently because it shows up when I'm like, I don't know.
So it can ridicule you for how much you sit.
I know. It's like, hey, that's what my couch tells me. It's like, yeah, you feel fatter today. Get off me and go run. I wish my couch.
That would be.
That would be good.
That would be good.
Shut up, couch.
No,
you don't know me.
So awkwardly enough, like I have this little love seat that it was my parents.
Yeah.
And at some point they gave it to me, and they had it forever before Andrew was born. And then I got it, and it's this nice black leather. I don't know who made this thing, but they deserve like a Nobel Prize because these two couch pieces still exist, still look nice. Yeah. Leather's not cracked, nothing's torn. I feel like it's 20 years old at this point. I don't even know, like no joke. And I have 6 children, like you said. This stuff survives.
Yeah.
So it's amazing furniture. Yeah. Anyways, today.
Now that we're caught up on that.
Now that everyone's tuned out and went on with their lives, today we're going to talk about I guess not really doctrine, I guess to a point, like just kind of theological stuff, and we like to talk about things of God and in the church here on this podcast.
Every now and
believe it or not,
Yeah.
It's not all about couches and robot vacuums.
That's right.
And ranting
being
about
old,
our wives,
being boomers.
Yeah.
Non-boomer boomers.
Yeah, the youngest boomers.
That's right.
But we want to talk about worship. Worship in our personal lives, but I'd say more so as far as worship collectively and corporately, and the importance of doing that in a manner that allows us to be impactful, I guess, culturally, and remain culturally significant and things like that. Yeah. And so this all started with, I don't know, this isn't technically a meme so much as an advertisement that Caleb sent me that I ignored for, said on the 3rd. I ignored it for 15 days.
That's right. It's usually how texts and things go around this place.
And so here we are 2 weeks later, and he asked me, did you get that thing I sent you? Like, what in the world are you talking about?
Yeah.
Freaking liar.
Yeah.
And, sure enough, it was there. So, Kayla, I'm going to pull this up so everybody can see it. This is no context here. I have no idea what this means. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
So if you're just listening, which if you are, you're missing out on so much quality on our visual channel here. But somebody, a Facebook friend, had shared this person's channel, and if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know that I'm not much for kind of the kind of the more fringe parts of our faith, shall we say, and so anytime somebody shares stuff like this, I immediately start going down the rabbit hole, and I'm just scrolling through this lady's channel, and I come across this advertisement for what she calls worship flags, and it's this worship flag course, and And so if you were just listening to us, we were flashing the actual image of the
I'll pull that back up real quick.
Anyway, and it says on here, it says it's worship flag chorus, and it says understanding biblically why we flag and practical guidance. And I was like, what is this? And so I had to send it to Aaron and say, hey, we should do this. Like, we should take this course because we definitely are missing out on worship flags. And anyway, but it's kind of spurred this conversation that what is worship and kind of what is.
Yeah. I just wonder, do all worship flags have to have a dove representing the Holy Spirit? Do you think she has other worship flags?
I don't know.
I wonder if she has an ark on one of them.
Yeah. So it's like I'll go ahead and preface this. Like if you're a firm believer in worship flags, you probably want to go ahead and shut us off because we're probably gonna make fun of this.
Yeah. Well, that was the whole goal, I thought.
Yeah. Well, and so but it does get us into the conversation of like, well, one, what is worship? And two, what is is there such a thing as acceptable worship or not acceptable worship? But where's the line, right? Because worship is I would say this, worship is definitely subjective. And obviously when we say worship as, evangelical Christians, the first thing that comes to mind is music, right? We think that's kind of worship, but that's not exactly, the Bible doesn't ever explicitly say that. It doesn't say, well, to worship God, play 3 songs before the message, and then, that fulfills your worship obligation.
No, you sure?
It's in 3 John 3:16. No, I'm just kidding.
No, and I want to preface this. When we talk about this, it's our cameras are all messed up today. So if you're watching, we've kind of like messed with things a couple times, but. We get this, you can choose to worship however. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. We're not saying, hey, worship flags are just wrong. You're going to go to hell if you have a worship flag. That's not the point. We are going to kind of poke fun at this, but for good reason, to hopefully kind of help people to see some things, because culturally, to some degree, things have changed, and it's important. It's important that if you have a conviction to worship God a certain way, to be obedient and things like that. I think that's important too, right? If you feel that God's led you to something, truly led you, and you've taken all of these things we're going to talk about into an account, that's between you and God. That and worship is personal between you and God. But the way we're set up, as we'll talk about here in a little bit, is worship is corporate too, right? And it's the things that take place, how they impact those around us is important to note, and so all of these things matter, because even though you could make a statement that your faith is personal, right? Yes, it is. There's a personal relationship you have with you and God. There's also the fact that we're commissioned to reach those outside of the church. So that matters as well, in how we do things, how we handle ourselves, how we present ourselves publicly. And so we kind of just want to spend some time talking about all of this, and as Caleb said, there's not a certain menu of things that's appropriate and not appropriate when it comes to worship in the church. That's exhaustive. There's not a prescribed method. Only do these things and nothing else. But we do just kind of want to spend some time dissecting this and see what we come up with here. And so, you got anything else?
Yeah, no, I would say, the point you're making is good, in that, as Christians, we gotta understand that, these things don't happen in a vacuum, and culturally where we're at and socially where we're at, we're such a self-centered society nowadays. It's just me. What makes me happy? What makes my feels good? Yeah. And I mean and that's the area in which we operate, and unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but as Christians, we're called to not be that way, and I think, what is unfortunate is that has bled over into Christianity. Part of it is culturally, part of it is the church's fault when we've spent the last 20 years trying to make everything, okay, we're going to cater to, the unchurched, which is good, that the motive is right. right? We want to appeal to non-believers, but we want to, when you cater to every last want and need and desire to make, we're going to make our church look exactly like you want it. So you will come. So then when they come, and then, then it's like, well, we've painted ourselves into a corner where it's like, well, what we've done is we've told you that everything you want is the most important thing. And so now everything has become like the self-centered, it's kind of the self-centeredness in the church where our goal, corporately is to make everybody happy. We want everything to look right and sound right, and we don't want to say anything that might hurt your feelings. We don't want to confront you with any sort of truth. And so what we've done is we've created a culture of consumers, and where all we think about is ourselves. And what we're going to talk about here is that we got to pull away from that. We got to what you think is worshipful, especially in the corporate setting, which is important. Corporate worship matters. We want to try to sound cool and be like, well, we don't need another religion kind of thing. Like, well, that is a part of our faith is gathering together as believers, and there's rules that dictate that, regardless if you formalize that or not. There's some sort of social norms that are going to operate when you come together as a group. And so how do we balance what we want versus what's good for us as a body? And so that's what I mean when I say, like, worship doesn't happen just, or these decisions or what we think about it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. Like, you can't I just want to do this and the consequences be darned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And that is a good point, right? It's man, these things don't happen in a vacuum, and they do matter. I want to start. Caleb brought this passage up as we were kind of seeing what we're going to talk about here, and it's living sacrifice to God. It's Romans 12:1 and 2. This was written by Paul and to the church in Rome, and he says this: "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you, give your bodies to God because of all he's done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him." And so, stopping right there, when we look at that passage, that worship is so much more than music, right? It is, we worship God by how we live, and that's the first kind of thing to keep in mind. And it's giving up our will in that, right? In making sure that as we engage in worship, that it's not about us, it is about him. So there's certain things that we can make arguments on both sides, like, again, if God's leading you towards something and you really feel God's Spirit speaking to you about that, and that's going to be your act of worship, that's important. That's important. If it's just your flesh, sometimes you got to let things go for the greater good of the church. Caleb was sharing, I don't know if time's appropriate to share out of the Chariots of Fire.
Yeah.
But I thought this kind of spoke to that.
Yeah. So I was talking about, if you've ever seen the movie Chariots of Fire, which I was telling Aaron, I said I watched when I was, at least part of it as a kid, and I was like, this is the most boring movie ever. I never got it. But now I'm older and wiser, and I'm also, I've talked about many a time, I'm a triathlete, and so I'm in this endurance world, and so these things appeal to me more. But if you've never seen the movie Chariots of Fire, I highly recommend it. It's based on a true story of a guy named Eric Liddell, who was a runner for England, but he was also a missionary, and he and the movie is about him, kind of these competing interests, right? He's called to the mission field, but then he's also fast. He's found this out. He's and he's fast enough to be an Olympic runner in the I can't remember. I have the synopsis, but here, and I can't remember. But it's like the early 20s or whatever for the Olympics in. Anyway, in the movie, he goes and chooses not to compete because his qualifying heat is going to be held on a Sunday. And so he ends up running a race that he hasn't trained for. And I'll leave it there, and you can watch it. Highly recommend it. But the thing about, I love about the movie in this quote that he says is that Eric treated his running, his ability to run, as a form of worship, and that because what is worship? Well, worship is honoring God, right? It's giving God kind of the primacy in your life, saying that you're you are God, and I'm going to honor you in all these things, and always acknowledge kind of your place in my life as being over me or authority, and understanding that all I do and all I have comes from you, right? And that's what worship is.
Yeah.
And so in this, there's a scene where I think it's his sister asks Eric something about why, because he's struggling between the two, and about why do you need to run or whatever, and he says this quote, and it says, and I love, like I said, there's two quotes that I love as far as like I like to apply to my running, and this is one of them. Is I believe God made me for a purpose, but He also made me fast, and when I run, I feel His pleasure. And I have those moments when I'm out running and training, and when I'm not feeling like I'm about to die. There are moments where it comes together, and a lot of times people always ask, well, what do you, doesn't that get boring? What do you do, like mentally? What do you, I'm out running for 10 miles or something, a really long run, especially because I do a lot of my running at a track. So I'm just running in a loop over and over and over. And I said, well, a lot of time is spent, praying or talking to God, or, asking for guidance in my life. It becomes a worshipful experience. And I have those moments where it starts to click, and I feel good, and I feel, and I'm just kind of like appreciative of the ability to do these things that I'm able to do. And that's because God's given me the ability to do them. And, and so that can become, worship, and that's what, we, like we were talking about at the beginning, we get fixated on worship is just the music at the beginning of service, and it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And it can be all these things, being your family as a dad, raising your kids in a way that honors God is an act of worship, I feel.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things like that. So, but yeah, that movie definitely, it's back when Hollywood would get away with making Christian movies, very Christian movie. So
yeah. When did it take place?
The movie came out in 1981, but the story was in the early 1920s. I think.
So so he had to. For it to be an act of worship, he was like having to run with what is it called, a stereophone? So he would have the music, right?
Yeah, that's right. That wonderful.
I don't know how he had his hands up. He must have carried it on his back.
I'm sure that record was skipping a lot.
But obviously
playing that first Hillsong album.
Yeah, playing that first Hillsong album. But that is a great example of how, worship can be and should be so much more than the songs at the beginning of service. And that's not even a necessary part of it as far as that goes. And that really, when we look at Romans, and we'll pull that back up again, it says, give your bodies to God, right? Because of all He's done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He'll find acceptable. And this is truly the way to worship Him, giving Him everything. And then it goes on further. It says, don't copy the behaviors and customs of the world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And so when we look at that, it's important to know that our worship, our church services, the things that we do should not become completely worldly either, right? We have to have this balance, and we talked about this a little at the beginning. In many ways, our churches swung so far over to be completely seeker sensitive, and I've poked fun. Caleb's poked fun. I think is on this program that we've done it. That the ones that are dang near putting on Disney on Ice productions that have no type of gospel content. It's like, what is the purpose of that? What's your point here? It doesn't make any sense. So you're getting people, plenty of people are showing up, but all you've done is made it a wonderful place to go to hell from type of thing. Like you've got to present message and truth. So we can't just copy everything, but there's this balance, right? How do we give everything to God and not copy the customs and behaviors of the world, but look appealing, right? And to do these things in a way that honors God and honors what He's done for us, but doesn't run people off. There's another passage. Let me get to that real quick. It's in 1 Corinthians 14, and verse 23. And in the context of this, it's tongues and prophecy. And I'll say this, between Caleb and I, there'd probably be a little bit of division in the way we view those things. But it's not the point of this passage is not what we're going to focus on, whether, how that plays out. But it says this, even so, if unbelievers or people who don't understand these things come into your church meeting and hear everyone speaking an unknown language, they will think you're crazy. And so here we have Paul. He's talking about tongues, but he points out the fact, and this is after him going on, this is from God, this is good, yada, yada, yada. But then he's like, but if unbelievers come in,
right,
and hear this, they may think you're crazy, and so there's just warning. So you have this scriptural type of thing in there that points to the fact that yes, the things of God is good, and being spiritual is good, and all of that's great, but don't lose sight of unbelievers, and I think we can do that. So we can't be so far one way that we lose sight of the things of God. We can't be so far the other way that we lose sight of the fact that the church as it is today is present in a secular world. So
yeah, but I should be able to do what I want.
Yeah,
it makes me happy.
Yeah, it makes you happy.
I don't care about other people.
So if you want to, bring your tambourine into a church of 1,500 people and,
that's right,
make 300 non-believers sound comfortable. That's your right? God's convicted you to do that.
That's right.
And again, I make the statement out of sarcasm and, and quite honestly, if you feel compelled to worship with a tambourine, I think you're a weirdo. Go for it. In the right context, in the right place, because it does matter. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves when there's people who don't yet know Christ. And that's people selfishly lose sight of that, and it is just about them.
Yeah,
and that becomes the focus. And you can make the argument, well, is it wrong for me to worship God this way? No. If that's your only question, no, it's not. But how about we add that caveat to it, that is it wrong for you to detract from the service in a way, or from the experience in a way that unbelievers are now more focused and upset about what you're doing, that they can't hear the message, they're shutting themselves off to the Holy Spirit? Is that okay?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. How many people is it okay for you to be personally responsible for not coming to Christ?
Yeah.
You let us know what that number is. And so, and that sounds harsh, but the thing is so what we're talking about here is, one, there's our individual worship, right? So like I was talking about, to me, my, running is a form of worship for me. I'm not going to do that in church. I'm not going to go do some laps while we're around the outside of the, the aisles and where there's space, where there's no chairs, while we're doing our music, because that's my form of worship, so I should be able to do that. No, it's going to weird people out.
Andy's a Baptist, so
that's right. I'm definitely if I move more than 2 feet one side or the other, that's a sin. So, but that's so we have to, again, there's this line that we have to walk as Christians, where we go, one, we have our personal, worship, which is should be everything we do, right? We're called to do everything, everything we do as if we're doing it for the Lord, right? Even our work, God, it's in the Bible. It says work as if you're working for God, because we want to honor Him in what we do. And so there's that personal level in which we do those things. But we don't necessarily bring those personal things into a corporate worship setting, because in the corporate worship setting, we do have an obligation to the people that are coming. It's not just us, right? And so we have to put away the selfishness that seems to pervade our culture today. And, the Bible tells us we got to be, we're in the world, but not of the world, right? Yeah. So we exist inside this culture. And so we've got to operate somewhat within this level. And so if the things that we do in a corporate setting, it hinders the ability for people to come to Christ, which is the most important thing, right? That's what we supposedly profess to believe. If that's what's happening, because I have the, I should be able to do this or that, and it's like, well, but we're missing out on a lot of people coming to church because they think you're weird. wow, I don't care. I'm just, well, they don't understand that. How about we warm them up to Christ and Christianity before we, tell them to bite the heads off the bat, right? So that's after your fourth visit.
Well,
I'm just kidding. You don't have to do that.
As I came into the church, I was not raised in church environments, had very little exposure to it. And honestly, the exposure I did have, I typically don't like to share this, was Southern Baptist. So, I didn't think people moved or talked or smiled in church, enjoyed themselves at all.
That's worshipful.
And so those were the only kind of like exposures that I had, except I do remember this one time. I'm a young teenager, and had moved to a different community. Some things were going on, and anytime there was like really like high levels of uncertainty or holidays, we might show up to a church service or two. And so this was one of those moments. And so we're in a new community, and so my parents don't have the church that they would typically pop into in those moments present. And so we show up to this one, and there's literally at some point a lady rolling around on the floor crying. And so it was one of those things at that point in my life, not knowing any of these things, not knowing we're not a Christian family at all. The way we're living and carrying out all of this. And so this like was scarring to me. It's like, I ain't ever coming back. These play freaking cult over here. But you know what I did in that is I applied it to not just a singular church. I applied it to all churches. That's weird. They're weird people. I don't want anything to do with this. Yeah. And then, later on I had some other exposures and stuff, but I remember even where I attend today, where we're at today, there was a moment where I encountered something that looked strange, looked awkward, looked uncomfortable. I almost left. And today, it doesn't bother me. Why? Well, because I've had an encounter with God and I've matured. But then what I witnessed and experienced, they weren't wrong. There's nothing wrong with what they were doing. But to my mind, as an unbeliever, somebody who's far from God, it was incredibly uncomfortable, incredibly weird. And again, it was almost enough to make me leave and not come back again, because I'm like, in my mind, I'm having flashbacks to the lady rolling around on the floor crying. Like, what are they getting ready to do here? And so those things matter in that context. And so we want to worship, right? We want to give our bodies to God, and we want, everything we do, like Caleb said, do everything as if you're doing it unto the Lord, because you are. So to live worshipful lives in every regard, but also to remember we're evangelistic, right? That we should be. And we kind of brought this up a little bit before. I think we've missed it, but we brought it up on our kind of pregame. Our services today, the thing to kind of keep in mind is there was a point where the gatherings were believers, right? That people would be converted and they would go to home churches and gatherings and things like that. Well, in 2024, that's not the case. Whether we want it to be or not, it's not. Culture changes, things shift. The things of God do not, right? I'm not saying that, right? God is the same today as he was yesterday, and the same as he'll be tomorrow and forever. So I'm not saying that, but what we do in culture does shift and change. And today, it is probably our most evangelistic thing that takes place. We have unbelievers that get invited and show up and come, and people who are on the fence because their wife has drugged them there, or they're probably not their husband. But I wish that was the case. And these things taking place, and so it's different. The dynamic's different. We do have a lot of people in our services that are not committed Christians. Now, again, 2,000 years ago, or not quite 2,000, but you get my drift. That would have been different. But today we have to keep those things in mind. We invite the non-believer in so they'll encounter God. They didn't encounter God because, again, we don't do a very good job of going to the streets and in places like that. That's a whole nother thing. But we got to keep that in mind. This is an evangelistic thing we're doing, as well as an edifying thing that we're doing, as well as a worshipful thing we're doing. And how do we balance all of these spinning plates?
Yeah. And so back to that verse, this isn't just what we're saying. This is, Paul, here we go, kind of the, outside of Peter, obviously the biggest influence on the church, as far as planting the early church, I mean, it says this, and is it in 1 Corinthians that he says stop worrying about what you eat?
Oh yeah,
is that what that?
I think it is somewhere.
So
there.
I mean, like he says it there. He's like, obviously prophecy or speaking in tongues, or at that time that he said, these are things that we do, but we're not going to do them at the expense of, scaring off the non-believer. And then later on he says this too. He says, if you go in, and you're with somebody, and they offer you something to eat that maybe you've considered unclean or whatever, like just eat it, right? Because again, to not offend and to be in Paul even says that in his famous speech on Mars Hill. I became everything to everyone so I can reach them for Christ, and in that what he's saying there is we're not gonna not be Christian, right? Or not, show that we're Christian or act. But what he's saying is that you have to take into account the culture in which you live in. And so, like Aaron was saying, this is the way we live now. Most people come to Christ by, coming to a church. Yeah, kind of a normal corporate worship setting, or a corporate worship setting where, a Sunday service or something like that. And, being in that environment and then coming for a while and kind of hearing what it's about, and then they accept Christ, and that's kind of the progression as an adult, right? If you grew up in the church, most of you accepted Christ as a youth or whatever. That's kind of a different path. But that's the way we are today. There's no point fighting against that. That's just the way we operate. And so at this point, we do have to start balancing what it is we want as far as worship goes, and what's best for the non-believers that are coming. Yeah. And again, that's not meaning, that we skew all things that are Christian, right? We don't, and this is definitely my area of complaint with the church, is that we've swung that pendulum too far. I think to be seeker sensitive, like we don't confront people with hard truths. We won't take a firm position on that as a church, as a big C church, like, having, I don't know, talking about sin. Like you go into modern church today, anywhere, like the chance that you're going to hear a sermon dedicated to sin, hell, or the devil is pretty low. Yeah. But what we will fight about is, should we be singing hymns or, the latest Hillsong song, or should we have the drums on the stage, or should we, I don't know, what other absurd argument would we have? That's the
color
stuff
of the carpet.
Yeah, the color of the carpet, pews or chairs, what kind of donuts or coffee do we have?
Baptismal, we should have a traditional baptismal. So it's like, so like, what does that mean? Should we have the Jordan River running through the sanctuary?
No, yeah, which may or may not be clean. Who's doing what upstream? It's
the hymns. The hymns always gets me too. It's because like, Jesus didn't sing these, right?
Well, some of them are about as old as Jesus now.
They were the King James. We should have the King James
the same Bible that Jesus read. Yeah. That's the argument we'll have. We will have those arguments. We won't have the arguments about like presenting hard truths or scriptural, those kinds of things, like, which kills me, But yeah, or we'll have an argument about, well, I should be able to run around like a crazy person in service because this is my act of worship or whatever. It's like, well, that's good. I'm glad you can worship that way, because that family of 5 who's coming to church for the first time is not coming back. Yeah, I hope it was worth it for you.
Well, in the passage you were talking about, I think I found it here. 1 Corinthians 8. So some are accustomed to thinking of idols as being real. So when they eat food that's been offered to idols, they think of it as the worship of real gods, and their weak consciences are violated. It's true that we can't win God's approval by what we eat. We don't lose anything if we don't eat it, and we don't gain anything if we do. But you must be careful so that your freedom does not cause others with a weaker conscience to stumble. So, and this can be applied to, as Caleb was talking about, to our worship, right? Is it wrong, again, to do certain things in a worship setting? No, it's not. But are you causing those with a weaker conscience to stumble? I want to share. I can't pull it up on the screen because I couldn't log into my account, but I've got it on my phone. It's it's longer than I would typically want to sit here and read, but I'm going to read it anyway. So it's from the Screwtape Letters, which was written by C.S. Lewis, and these are like two demons corresponding. You only get one side of it. Screwtape writing to Wormwood, and what it is talking about his patient, right? Wormwood's patient, which is somebody that he's oppressing and attempting to win over for the enemy. So as I read this is represents a demon speaking to a demon. And it says, one of our great allies at present is the church itself. Do not misunderstand me. I do not mean the church as we see her spread out through all time and space and rooted in eternity, terrible as an army with banners. That, I confess, is a spectacle which makes our boldest tempters uneasy. But fortunately, it is quite invisible to these humans. All your patience sees is the half-finished sham Gothic erection on the new building estate. When he goes inside, he sees the local grocer with rather an oily expression on his face, bustling up to offer him one shiny little book containing a liturgy which neither of them understands, and one shabby little book containing corrupt texts of a number of religious lyrics, mostly bad and in very small print. When he gets to his pew and looks around him, he sees just that selection of his neighbors whom he has hitherto avoided. You want to lean pretty heavily on those neighbors. Make his mind flit to and fro between an expression like the body of Christ and the actual faces in the pew next to him. It matters very little, of course, what kind of people the next pew really contains. You may know one of them to be a great warrior on the enemy side. No matter. Your patience, thanks to our Father below, is a fool. Provided that any of those neighbors sing out of tune, or have boots that squeak, or double chins, or odd clothes, the patient will quite easily believe their religion must therefore be somehow ridiculous. And this was written a while ago in the 40s. But I mean, that really does speak to what we have to keep in mind is people come in, that's what they do, right? Oftentimes, you'd be amazed how many people are uncomfortable about coming into our building. They have something in their mind, right, that they've already passed judgment on what we do. The thing they're coming in to do often is get some confirmation about how it's crap or not for them or not going to work. That's just the truth. I think more people fall into that category than coming in with some sense of hope of this is finally my answer. I'm going to get what I need there. No, that comes through through experiencing the truth of the gospel and receiving Jesus. As somebody who came into the church, I mean, I had preconceived notions in my mind. I had encountered churches that were judgmental. I had wounds, mistreatments. I had all of these stereotypes in all these things. And I, in one sense, was looking for confirmation about why I don't need to waste my time here. So then I could go on living the way I wanted to live, right? Without any condemnation. And so we have to keep that in mind, right? That this is what people are doing. And so, yes, we have freedom. But be careful your freedom does not cause others with a weaker conscience to stumble. And so it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's something, that's a good point that we don't think about, especially if you've been in the church culture for a long time, is you forget what it's like, what it is to be a new believer or a new person to church, and that, so somebody's coming to church for the first time, anytime you go to something, any sort of circumstance, or, a new cultural kind of event, right? So like going to a church or going to, so like Jill and I went to, we've been to a Jewish wedding before. I had a friend that was Jewish when I was in chiropractic school and they got married. And I obviously never been to a Jewish wedding. I don't have a lot of Jewish friends here in Oklahoma and, in rural Oklahoma, maybe if you live in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, but, we lived in not a lot of Jewish people. So I've never been to a Jewish wedding, and so you're going to that. And if you've ever done something like that, you're kind of, you're like, I don't know what to, am I going to, when to sit, when to stand, what to say, are we going to, what is it going to entail? And it was very interesting. I really enjoyed it because of just I don't know, you can feel the culture or the tradition when you go to a Jewish wedding. I mean, obviously it's been around for a while. So, I mean, and so it was very fascinating. And, but still there's that apprehension of like, oh, I'm not going to know, I'm going to be the odd man out here.
Yeah.
And so people, we lose that in the church culture sometimes, in that understanding that somebody coming for the first time, maybe this is an unchurched family. They're coming, they're not part of our group. Yeah. They don't, they're going to be apprehensive coming. And so, it behooves us as a church body to actually think about that, to be considerate of that. That is something we're very intentional about on our Monday night service for recovery. And this is what something I always tell our volunteers is like, listen, people that come on a Monday, as long as the court's not ordering them to be there, and they have a choice to not come back, because most times they're going to look for a reason not to come back, and so we need to be perfect. And I tell them, I said, I don't expect us to be perfect, but I expect us to want to be, because I want us to not have any reason for them to not come back. And I want things to run as smoothly as possible, because we want them to, to be able to come and feel like this isn't chaotic. And part of that chaos comes from just not knowing what's going to happen. And that happens on a Sunday or any other, like I said, any other event that you go to that's kind of outside of your norm. There's going to be the social rules and things that guide that event. And so people that are coming to church for the first time, or maybe it's been a really long time, or maybe they grew up in a Catholic home and are coming to a Protestant service, or vice versa.
Maybe they're just wounded from the church, and they're coming back.
Right. The old church they went to, was a lot different. I mean, the church I went to when I grew up is a lot different than the church I go to now, just culturally what we do. And so, we have to take those things into account. And so, this takes us back to what we talked about at the very beginning, is like, we can have our individual worship, but when we come together corporately, we've got to understand, and we have to maybe take into account and maybe just consider, just maybe, hang with me here, other people and kind of consider, okay, what, the things that I want to do right now in this moment, maybe I'm excited about this song or whatever, like, is what I'm doing. And this doesn't mean we're walking on eggshells either, but I feel like there's
balance.
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like there's kind of a wide swath of what's, what's acceptable, in the political world, they call it the Overton window, right? The Overton window is what's kind of the political norm. I don't know what the church window would be. We should, the stained glass window of worship. There's kind of this, like I said, I feel like it's fairly wide, right? And, what I'm going to do is that exists within inside this window, kind of like, now different churches have different what falls in that window is different. If you go to an uber, like charismatic, church, like what is their norm is going to be a lot different than kind of cultural norm. Yeah. And there's a reason that, those churches are not necessarily growing at the same level as,
But, I'll say this, you said there is a kind of a wide window within churches. And I'll say, within our church, obviously, everybody knows Caleb and I go to church together. Caleb worships much differently than me, in the sense of he's probably never jumped up and down in the sanctuary. No. Do you raise your hands?
No.
Yeah. See, so I always raise my hands. That's the bare minimum. And there are times where my feet leave the ground. It's not that, and that part's not always often. That kind of depends on the setting. Again,
at your age, you might pull something.
I might pull something, and that depends on the setting. Again, what are we doing here? What's going on? And in all of that, and so we take these things into account, because what is our goal? I mean, we have two goals. We want to grow closer to Christ. We want to experience His presence. We want to worship Him and honor Him. Oh, and we want to reach people. I want to reach people, and I'm willing to set aside things that I may do, because I fall much more heavily charismatic than Caleb, and Caleb will come out of his comfort zone that way to reach people, and he does, and I will tone things down. Why? To reach people. We both sacrifice things to be in the setting that we're in. Why? Because people matter. People matter to us, and we want more than we want what we want. We want other people's to have what we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Unfortunately for me, given what I do here at the church, like my corporate worship is now like ruined because I can't sit and listen to music now without just like. So what I do here at the church, my title is music director, and people are like, "Oh, so you sing?" I'm like, "No, I make sure everything works."
Yeah,
that's kind of my job. Is I'm on stage and I manage the band and I make sure the technology is doing what it's supposed to do. All the stuff and parts and pieces that go into worship. Like if you come to our church on a Sunday. You don't ever have to think about things working or, you're in the moment because I'm thinking about all those things, and so if I'm not on stage doing that and I'm sitting in the crowd, like I'm still thinking about those things. It's really hard for me to do that. And so like, again, a lot of worship, kind of music, corporate worship happens when I'm running because I'm listening to music, and if especially Christian songs, come on, like my paces get really fast or whatever because I can be in the moment there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's hard for me to just to disengage and actually be in that moment, just because of what I do anymore. But yeah, I mean, what I do or what I don't do is more apropos. I wouldn't tell everybody to be that way. I don't think that, that's too expressive or whatever. Like, I understand that there's that window. And so, how I feel or how I express myself or don't express myself, like I don't expect other people to be that way. Just like I don't expect I don't want other people to tell me this is how you should do it, which sometimes you do get into that. Raise your hands. Like I don't have to do anything. That's a good way to get me to not do. You should do this. Okay, well I know what I'm going to not do right now. My favorite phrase growing up, my mother will tell everybody, was "You're not the boss of me."
Yeah,
and that still seems to be my favorite phrase. But so there is that, and we talked about this before we came on. There's the other side of that, and that's where someone like me does decide, like, this is, you shouldn't do this, or you should be, we get too critical, we're too, too focused on what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And just like that passage says, where you're focused on the people behind you or beside you or whatever, and it's like, if that's your focus during worship too, then we're doing it wrong. And that's, we find that people that get too critical of worship, at least corporate worship, it's like, well, if you're actually worshiping in the moment, like actually focused on God, you wouldn't notice a lot of this other stuff too, like I said, that's me, and mine's not, like I said, I'm not there to criticize or whatever, but like, it's hard for me to not focus on, like, is the band sound good? Does is the music sound right? Does it, I'm focused on those things, but if they don't go right, I'm not going to write a note to the church, be like, hey, you guys suck, but we do have that kind of stuff, and you got to, like, well, where's your heart? We were just telling him this, Aaron, before this, but I've been at a church where one of the complaints we got was that the worship pastor's guitar was too shiny. And it's like, well, who are you focused on?
Yeah. I couldn't imagine being that person.
Well, I mean, we've had it here. And if you're listening, the person who wrote this, you're wrong in this. Like, somebody wrote once, all the songs sucked or whatever today. It's like, sorry, we don't take requests, like it's not about you, and, as a music director, I'm up there playing songs. I have one particular song and I won't say which one it is, but, the whole worship team knows I don't like it. And, but hopefully nobody in the congregation knows that I don't like it, because it's not my job to express my opinion on the music. My job is to help usher in people into worship in that moment. And so, I'm not going to allow myself in my demeanor, I'm not going to sit up there and look bored while we play this particular song or other songs. I mean, there's other songs I don't like. And that's fine, but other people, plenty of people like those songs. And so if that helps them worship, then, I'm going to do my best to help them worship, and regardless of what my opinion is of that song or the lack of musicality in it. And so that's the thing too, on the flip side of being aware of what we do, and does it affect other people? Does it possibly push away non-believers? On the other side of that is that, we're so focused on just everything except God, that we don't enter into worship at all. We're sitting in church and like, I'm still mad that they, the donuts weren't from the right place, or the coffee tasted bad, or that girl's not wearing the right outfit on the stage. Jill and I, we grew up conservative, very conservative Southern Baptist, and we led worship at our church I grew up in. And one time she got a complaint because she was wearing pants, not jeans, like dress slacks.
Yeah.
Not a dress. She wasn't wearing a dress on stage. Somebody was complaining about that. It was like, well, who are you here for?
Yeah.
Are you here for a fashion show, or are you here for God? So I think that's the other side of it, and that we go, where's your focus, right?
Yeah.
Is it on the things of God, or is it on just what makes you happy too? As far as, I want things to be a certain way and force that on other people. So, that takes us back to kind of the main point of this is that, worship corporately, we have to have balance. We have to be aware of where our heart is, and are we doing things in a way that can negatively affect, non-believers, drive people away, but also are we, on the flip side of that, are we being, too focused on being divisive to the believers, to our church body? I think that's the balancing act we have to play.
Yeah, no, that's good. So before we close, I have this wedding story I wanted to share.
Okay.
So never been to a Jewish wedding, but I got invited to this Hispanic wedding, and obviously I'm not Hispanic, nor do I speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And it was also Pentecostal. It was a Pentecostal.
Yeah.
And so most of the weddings in Spanish, actually all of it, but there was times that they were praying in tongues, and so I kept getting confused because I can't understand anything anyway. So it was just it was, and then more odd than that, and these are like very deep rooted like cultural heritage. I mean, it's very, very Hispanic. They served Italian food. So,
wow.
And beyond that, the lady that invited it to me, she owned a Mexican food truck, and really good. So it's like she invited me and Janelle to her daughter's wedding and all of this. And so we're expecting great Mexican food because she makes great Mexican food. We had spaghetti. And
it's cheap,
And then it was, Pentecostal, which, again, Janelle and I, we fall into that category. So that part, but it was just like trying to pick up are they is that Spanish
tongues?
But I don't know what's going on here. And it was one of those people all of a sudden stood up, and so we're popping up what's going on here?
Yeah,
it was a good time though.
Down to the obviously Jewish people, they're not anti-alcohol.
Yeah.
And the rabbi was late, and so they opened the bar before the wedding.
And there we go.
Yeah, so Jill and I were just sitting there like, man, these people are getting hammered before this wedding even started. But it was crazy, and they do part of the wedding in Hebrew, and so that was kind of cool to hear that. And then, but the reception, man, that's wild. Those people, they do the whole lifting people up on the chairs and the singing
while they're drunk.
Yeah, it was pretty sketchy. Luckily, nobody was dropped. They did serve a lot of food, and it was really good. But yeah, it's an interesting thing.
How was I don't know if I've had Hebrew Jewish cuisine. What is that like?
Man, I don't even remember. I know there was they brought out.
Cannoli
bread.
Is the only thing that might fall in that category I've had, which I know this is delicious.
Yes.
So if that's if that's Italian, the bar, I'm all in.
Yeah, no, it was definitely good. That's why in The Godfather he said, leave the gun, grab the cannolis. It's worth grabbing. But no, it was bread, and then I can't remember what else we had. We had to leave early because it started late. This was in downtown Chicago, so it started late. So if you've ever been to Chicago and ridden the train to get around.
I drove through Chicago one time praying I wouldn't get shot.
Yeah, well, you're even praying harder on the train. The train is incredibly sketchy during the day, and so this is leading into night. Like I said, it started an hour late, and so here it is. This reception is now going into midnight, and I was like, we need to go, because the later it gets, the crazier the train gets, and so and here we are, to just the rednecks walking through downtown Chicago late at night, dressed nice by ourselves, and we're getting on the train, and I'm glad we left when we did, because the ratio of crazy to normal had flipped. They were dominating the train at that point. So we couldn't have left early enough. But especially for somebody who does not like cities. I don't like cities. I don't like them at all. I don't understand the appeal. So it was pretty crazy. But yeah. Anywho.
Yeah. I think that's it for today. Again, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to check out any that you've missed. Go back, listen, and continue just to engage with us moving forward. We'd love to hear any feedback, anything like that you have. But like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you guys right back here next week.